Jane Fleishman is a trained sexuality educator and a longtime friend. We met at the Labor Center at UMass, 40 something years ago. We were doing clerical organizing. We had an organization called 12 to 1 because that was the lunch slot that clerical workers had and could attend our meetings. We've been friends and neighbors for years since then, and she now does a monthly segment on my husband Bill Newman's radio show called Sex Matters. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane.
Thank you, Dale. Dale, when I first started doing the radio show with Bill, he wanted to call it Sex with Jane. And I said, I don't think so. So I'm really happy. Thank you, Dale, so much for that lovely introduction. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks to everyone who's been behind the scenes and also up front, Rick, Inez, Sada, Lisa, Patrick, Dan, and Kathy for helping orient me to this wonderful series that you're doing with retirees. And thanks to Max, too. I'm so psyched that I got to see your face. So as Dale said, I'm going to give you a talk today, but also I'm going to hopefully engage you in some conversation about what is going on in the world of sexuality for older adults, which, just so you know, there wasn't much going on at all except negative kinds of research when I first started my work. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. As Dale said, I'm a ASECT certified sexuality educator, but that's just my recent part of my life. I retired. I'm a state employee from the state of Connecticut, and I retired with a pension thanks to the labor movement after a rewarding 30-year career in the public sector in Connecticut. And I was a proud member of the Connecticut State Federation of Teachers. I worked with District 1199 for a number of years. But when I retired at 55, I just wasn't ready to stop making trouble. So I decided to go back to school, got my PhD in human sexuality at the age of 62, which is not easy, but I was very proud of myself. And as part of my doctoral research, I conducted research on the sexual satisfaction of older adults in same-sex relationships. And I can certainly talk to you about that later if you're interested, tell you a little bit about my results. But I also write, I speak, I have a podcast, and as Dale said, I even appear on a radio show in Western Mass. Now, a lot of times I'm out on the road doing workshops at senior centers or councils on aging, assisted living communities, and other senior living residences. And I don't do this work only for the people who live there or show up to my workshops like you, but I also do it for myself because it gives me hope for our future, especially in these pretty bleak times. And I'm going to be talking about sex today, and however you define it, whether it's oral, anal, or vaginal penetration, whether it's masturbation or mutual masturbation, or what Betty Dodson called solo sex, or whether it's heavy makeout sessions after the family leaves or before they arrive, whether it's dreaming up fantasies, whether it's watching somebody doing something sexy on your screen by yourself or with another person, whether it's using a sex toy or a wedge or a pillow or having an amazing massage, or whether it's something you've never spoken about or haven't done in a long time, whatever it is, however you define sex, as someone who has lived for many decades like I have, you get the opportunity now to talk about it in any way that works for you. There's no shoulds in this, there's no have-tos. And by talking about it, it also can give me hope. Now, if you would be so kind in the chat as we're getting started here, if you could just write a few words about what gives you hope for the future. It could be about sexuality, it could be about pleasure, it could be about anything that gives you hope. And Dale's going to take a look at those as they come in, and then a little later on, I'm going to ask Dale to tell me a little bit about what's in there. I can't do that many things at once. I can only see the screen. I can't see the chat. So here's the plan for today. first of all, I developed this presentation for you, and it's chock full of all the stuff you never learned in sex ed class. At least I never learned it. Here's what I learned in sex ed. Girls, keep your legs together. It didn't work for me, but anyway, that's what I learned. We're going to learn a little bit more here today because sex is complicated. So I'm going to also offer you a chance to look at some of the research and a model and some activities, lots of resources and tips. And most importantly, it's about hope because I'm a pleasure-focused sexuality educator. I'm not a problematizer. No, that's not a real word, but I don't only talk about the problems about sex and aging. You can get that elsewhere. Just look on the web and you'll be able to read about erectile dysfunction, or what I call erection differences, or lack of desire, what I think of as a solid expression of what's going on in the world around us, which might possibly be a lack of information about how to create desire, or vaginal dryness and not about lube. That's easily remedied. A lot of the stuff that you read about that are problems that older adults have around sex can easily be remedied, and they're not always physiological, and sometimes they're in our heads, and sometimes it's part of the world that we're living in. So I'm going to be answering your questions later on. Think about what you'd like to ask, but I'm all about sexual pleasure and what that could mean in each of our lives, in whatever way we define sex. And when I talk about pleasure with people, it brings people hope. So, Dale, did anybody write anything that gives them hope in the chat? Any hope out there?
There's a lot of hope out here.
Awesome.
And most of it has to do with people. So
Awesome.
I had people say young folks,
Mm.
friendships, my children and my grandchildren, people fighting for justice, activists promoting democracy, young people, young people, young people.
I love it.
And the last one, good health.
Awesome. Great. And good health is real important. As my grandmother used to say, you should only have your health, but it's important. And we're going to talk about how sex is actually good for your health in just a moment. First, I want to dedicate this session to somebody that I look to for many years. That's Bell Hooks. And what I love is this amazing quote that I found of hers in one of her books: "The practice of love is the most powerful antidote to the politics of domination." I just love that. And if you're not familiar with her, she was really a trailblazing Black woman who died just recently in December of 2021 at her home in Berea, Kentucky, at 69 years old. And she was the voice of a generation, and she wrote in depth on a whole bunch of topics around race and gender and class and feminism. And she always spoke up for working class people and the Black community. Her writing was really powerful for me, and I want to dedicate this session to Bell Hooks for being willing to take on some of the greatest challenges in her lifetime, in our lifetimes, not that different from the work that many of you were doing in the work that you've done and in your work as retirees. So we're going to begin today's session by asking a couple of questions. So Sada, would you be willing to put the first poll up? The first poll is just a real easy one about how old are you? So if you're anywhere between 55 and 64, click the first one. 65 to 74, 75 to 84. If you're older than 85, and then if you're other, because I don't know, other people might sneak in who are younger. Or let's see what we got. We're almost there. Just a few more people to vote. There we go. Okay, Sada, you want to shut the poll down and share the results? So that's interesting, right? So most of the people here are between 65 and 74, then 75 to 84, and then 55 to 64. And just one person is over 85. Hooray, because, the data shows that people are still having sex in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. But one thing that I've noticed anecdotally is that in my workshops, there's always somebody who points to somebody in the back of the room and says something like this: This happened to me at the Salvation Army in Dorchester once. This woman came in and she said, see that woman back there? She's 92 years old and she's got 4 boyfriends. I don't know what they do. I couldn't ask her, but I was real excited about it. So thank you, all of you, for coming. So Sada, could we do the second poll, please? And this one is, what is your relationship status? Are you living with a partner or partners? Because we don't want to be only mono here. Might be some people who are poly. Are you in a relationship but not living together? Are you not in a relationship and that's cool with you? Or are you not in a relationship but you would like to be? And of course, there are other configurations. I just wanted to do kind of a quick poll here. If I was doing this as a more scientific poll, we would have many more possibilities. Okay, almost everybody has responded. Let's wait a couple more seconds, Sada, and then good. So let's share the results and show everybody what we got. Most people, 83%, are living with a partner or partners or a spouse. One or very small percentage are not living together in a relationship, and then about less than 15% are not in a relationship, and that's fine. Great, okay. And then we got one more poll. This one is a little bit more about sex. So Sada, can we do this last poll? You're doing very well, by the way. Thank you, everybody. And you know these are all anonymous. Do you feel sexually satisfied? All the time, most of the time, some of the time, none of the time, or other? Wow, the results are going back and forth between some and most. This is great. Okay, we're almost there. Just got a few people who haven't answered yet. And if you don't feel like answering, you don't have to. This is a consent-based workshop, right, Dale? And if you don't want to take a poll, you don't have to. In fact, if you don't want to answer any of my questions, you don't have to. This is the last question I'm going to ask you. Okay, we're done with that poll. And the results show that about 10% said all the time. Wow, okay. 30% most of the time, 47% some of the time. That's what I kind of expected. 7% none of the time, and other was also 7%. I'd love to hear what other meant, but we can do that in another workshop. Thank you, Sada. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I'd like to begin by keeping that in our brains about who's in the room. It's really helpful, especially on Zoom, and we can shut this off now with a little bit of a thought experiment. So everybody around you might be saying the same old thing about aging. They talk about their doctor's appointments, or what we call in our family organ recitals, or they talk about forgetting things, which we sometimes call brain farts, or something like that. But the question I have for you is, you're retired and you probably want more out of the rest of your life, since you don't have to be stuck in your job every single day, and you can do all sorts of things. And you might be wondering if your body can even get there anymore because you haven't been sexually with anyone in a long time. And you're wondering, does my body even know how it works? Well, you have come to the right place. And as I said earlier today, all double entendres are allowed in sex education world. So when I began doing this work, I realized that there was a whole lot in sex education that I'd have to think about if I wanted to provide sex education to older adults. And when I was in grad school, nobody was interested in older adult sexuality. It was incredible. They wanted to talk to young parents. They wanted to talk to kids, K through 12. They wanted to talk to college age people. They wanted to talk to people who are veterans, people with disabilities. But very few people were even interested in older adult sexuality. And so what I decided to do was really think about how I would present a whole lot of information that most people weren't getting. So in 2021, I read this very cool article in The Lancet, which for the first time brought sexual wellness into the public health sphere as a comprehensive model. Now, there's all sorts of sex education out there, like abstinence only, like medically inaccurate, seriously. But comprehensive sexuality education is what I subscribe to. And this is a comprehensive model. Now, we've had models before in sex ed, but this one really was impressive to me because it brings to light some of the current realities, because we know that sex ed is on the chopping block in many states. Not Massachusetts, however, but this is a comprehensive public health approach to sexuality, and it brings in sexual health, pleasure, sexual wellness, and sexual justice. And so I wanted to begin by telling you a little bit about when I talk about sex, it's not just the act of doing sex or having an orgasm if that's available to you, but it's the act of really thinking about sexuality writ large in terms of, for instance, sexual health. And this part of this model follows the World Health Organization definition of sexual health, which includes, stuff like fertility. Well, we're not really that worried about fertility. I mean, I know that, in the Bible there was, well, anyway, people could have a child many years after we imagine menopause or andropause, but also around regulation. But for those in our age group, prevention and management of what we call STIs now, we don't say STDs anymore, sexually transmitted infections, also sexual violence prevention, which at any age is important, and around desire and arousal. And, STIs are going up around the world for people in our age group, but the HIV status is actually going down. And we can talk about that later if you're interested. But these sexual functions around desire and arousal, as I said before, it's not only the biopsychosocial side, but it also could be other issues that are in the context of the environment that we live in. So that's also something to remember because we're going to talk next about sexual pleasure. Now, this is a huge change. Nobody had ever seen this in earlier models for sex ed, and it's related to both sexual health and sexual well-being. And it refers to this area that gets rarely discussed in high school or middle school sex education classes. And I always wondered about, why is it that we couldn't talk about pleasure? Is it because the lobby against sex ed was so vehement and so opposed? But sexual pleasure addresses these really diverse psychological and physical satisfactions of a sexual experience, plus external factors like self-determination, consent or safety or privacy, so vital to the work that I'm doing when I go to visit people in assisted living and senior living communities. Having the confidence and ability to communicate and negotiate sexual relationships. And it's person-centered, and it's not only person-centered, like, the interaction of the two people or three people or however many people are involved in that particular sexual experience, but it's also event-centered. So it's about consensuality, it's about timing, it's about the occurrence of an orgasm if an orgasm can occur, and it's about the use of a condom or other contraception or barrier. And then there's this new, really interesting area called sexual justice, which represents the larger, more global efforts to ensure social, cultural, and legal supports for equitable and person-centered sexual and reproductive experiences. And I love that they use the term sexual justice here, because it's similar to other movements around social justice, right? Food justice, environmental justice, racial justice, reproductive justice, education justice. And it's about equal access to sexual rights, this notion of sexual citizenship, which is also, interestingly, the name of a book by Jennifer Hirsch and Seamus Khan, Sexual Citizens, where they talk about sex, power, and sexual assaults on college campuses. And also the sex positive practices that are trauma informed. So they take into account what may have happened to us as young children or as young adults, and emphasize contributions of sexuality to overall sexual well-being and overall well-being of the body. And it's part of a larger effort to ensure equity in our justice systems. So when you put these together, then we have sexual well-being, which is really about sexual safety and respect and self-esteem, resilience, forgiveness. Forgiveness is such a big issue for many older adults because there's so much shame in what may have happened to us earlier in our lives, and self-determination. And finally, comfort with sexuality. Now, sexual well-being only exists in the context of each of these four areas, right? But I like this model because it takes all the earlier models a full step into our present realities. And that's where I want to lead you today, to think about sex and sexuality in terms of this whole comprehensive approach. So why is it integral to us at our age? Well, first of all, it's a meaningful indicator of our overall well-being because sexuality is connected to our overall health on the physical side as well as the mental health side. And it centers sexual health, pleasure, and justice for any age group. And it allows finally for a shift in thinking about sexuality from a binary yes or no. Am I having it or not having it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it hard? Is it soft? Am I wet? Am I dry? All those binaries to more of a multidimensional approach. And Maggie Stein, who's actually a researcher at Harvard now working with Hebrew Senior Life, has talked about this idea of a multidimensional approach to looking at sexuality for older adults. So what is sex? And what does it mean for older adults? And how can we think about even talking about it? I wanted to show you a short video. And Sada, I'm going to ask your help here for a moment. I'm going to just pause my share here and ask you to see if you can pull up the video. And before you do that, I just want to tell you, there are very few videos online about old people having sex. There's a whole lot of videos about people having sex. It's called porn. I'm not going to show you any porn today. But I wanted to give you a chance to hear some older people talking about sex in real terms, who they are. And they talk about it freely and openly. Now, this isn't the most representative group of people. In fact, it's only one group, and it's a very specific group of mostly white people and Jews in Southern California. But it was done by a film student at University of Southern California, USC. And I think that if you can take a listen to who they are, I think you'll enjoy their candor. So, Sada, take it away, please. For some reason I can't hear it.
All right, let me try to reshare.
It's very soft in the beginning, folks, but it does get louder, and it's only 5 minutes, so. Thanks, Sada.
You're welcome. All right, so more than one person can't hear. Just bear with me as I try and reshare.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, so this should be better. Let's start it from the beginning. Let me know if you can't hear it again.
Do you want?
Perfect.
The most romantic thing is the moment when I ask her, do you want to go to bed with me?
The first time I said no.
So a few days later, I asked her again. She agreed. This was the most romantic, wasn't it? The most romantic thing. My name is David Pielobroda.
My name is Ruth Cooper, and my age is
I
79.
was born in 1980.
My age is 92.
My name is Sunga Greisman Rubin, and I'm 84, going on 85.
How old am I?
Well, I truly believe you stay young because of sex.
At 18, we just wanted a sex object. At 75, you may still want sex. You're not sure you're going to get it, but you're looking for comfort.
I've always wanted romance in my life. Really love, and I think you need it all your life. You need it all your life. You need to be touched. You need to be felt. You need to be hugged. You need to be kissed.
Companionship is very important.
So we cover it up with, well, I don't need men in my life, and I'm past my desires. Baloney. I don't think you ever get past your sexual desires.
I adore it, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, he doesn't look it. He's a very sensual man.
Very.
Listen, I've had so many boyfriends, I can't even count them on my fingers and toes.
Most of the men my age or better are either dead, looking for a nurse or a purse, or sick.
I'm short, reserved, self-conscious, eager to please. I'm compassionate, a good listener.
I used to always look for a good-looking man and good dancers. That's what counted. And dress well. Oh, God forbid they shouldn't dress
She
well.
would be a non-smoker.
Yes, pretty, beautiful also,
He has to have his shit together.
Kindness, consideration.
sparkle in their eyes.
That tips well.
And no Republicans, please.
But there is something about a senior citizen community that you realize that you are mortal, You see too many people around you, and you know that someday you're going to say bye-bye too.
Unfortunately, I've outlived just about every one of my friends.
At this age, there isn't much time for independence. You think there's just a few years left, and you want to do as much as possible togetherness.
When my husband died, he was 52. I took off my wedding ring, and I said to myself, I wonder what's around the corner for me. And I think instead of sitting and saying, oh, he died, I always looked forward.
The person in my age who has the capacity of doing sex, this is the highest thing in the world, the greatest achievement in the world. And the pleasure is unbelievable.
This business of saying a man uses a woman for a one-nighter, what about a woman using a man? Is that terrible? Kushner and Tuchasarai. You know what that means? I hate to tell you. Kiss my you-know-what. It is, when you say it in English, it sounds bad, right? But in Jewish, it's kind of cute. And someone says something to you, yeah, Kushner and Tuchasarai, kind of cute,
Thanks, Sada. That's great. Any responses or reactions, please put them in the chat. I myself loved when she said a nurse or a purse, and then she said, and no Republicans. I thought that was quite funny. Any comments or reactions or questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. While you're doing that, I'm going to begin with the next portion of this talk, which is a bit of a research update. As I said, when I was doing my research for my doctoral work in 2015, 2016, I was looking at older adults, and I saw very little research on older adult sexuality that wasn't focused on problems or risk, um, or low desire or difficulties. And I have to say, in the last 8 years or so, I've really seen a sea change. And I also have seen that the audiences for my work have really grown. And it's not because of me particularly, it's because I think the world is changing a bit, and we're now beginning to see older adults in a much larger multidimensional context. So I wanted to begin with giving you just a bit of a research update. And I wanted to talk first about John Delamater's work. He's from University of Wisconsin-Madison. He just died a few years ago, and he was really one of the people that I looked to through the sex research that he had done. And he did a meta-analysis of older adults, and he found, in fact, that older adults are having sex. And it wasn't that sexual dysfunction comes because of age, but he found a few factors. One is that if you don't have a positive attitude about sex, if you don't have access to a partner or partners, if you don't have good physical or mental health, each of those can really exacerbate the difficulties with having a sexually satisfied older adult years. But it's not aging itself. In fact, I really try to focus a lot on this when I talk with social workers who are working in the gerontology field, or psychologists, or anybody who's working with older adults, to remind them that ageism is certainly not something that they would be unfamiliar with, but ageism around sexuality really is part of the bigger part of the problem. That's what Delamater's research showed us. Melania and Solway just a few years ago did this nationwide survey and found that for 75% of older adults, this is people age 55 and older. People define older adults at different ages, but in this one it was 55 and older. About 3/4 of the people they researched across the country said that sex was important. Now, that's only important if you connect sex to overall well-being. And Santos Iglesias and their colleagues found that by and large, people were interested in not only pursuing mental and physical health, but they were also interested in their own sexual well-being as they aged. But what I thought was one of the most interesting studies of all the ones that I had read was something that just came out a couple of 4 years ago. Harrison Orth found that, look at this, folks, positive self-esteem, self-regard, sexual identity are all associated with intimacy at any age, which means that it's not just young people who are struggling and being thoughtful about who they are in the world and how they would authentically identify themselves sexually or with their own gender, but it happens at any age, and they're all associated with intimacy. And intimacy can sometimes be a word correlated with emotional intimacy, but it's also correlated with sexual intimacy. And Beverly Whipple in 2001 did this unbelievable research on why sex is good for you, basically. We love Beverly Whipple. She's a retired Rutgers University professor and sex researcher, has done a lot on women's sexual response, and has done some really fascinating research on spinal cord injuries, on all sorts of things. And what she did was she and her colleagues went across all of the data that had been amassed up until that point and found that, for instance, sex is good for your heart. Sex can reduce regular sexual expression. And again, some of these terms elude me. What does regular mean? But more than less frequent sexual expression can lead to a reduction of risk of heart disease and the other illnesses associated with heart disease, can reduce the risk of two of the leading cancers, prostate cancer and breast cancer, can be a real analgesic and be a real pain reliever. particularly when orgasm and the flood of other neurochemicals like oxytocin and other endorphins flood through the system, can really be of much greater value than some of the over-the-counter pain relievers that people have been known to take. Sexual expression also more recently, since Beverly and her colleagues did this research, was found to actually enhance cognitive health, something that we're all really concerned about in terms of the fears we have looming any forms of cognitive dysfunction or forms of dementia. So really important research on the health benefits. I recently gave a talk to the, I think they called the Breathers Anonymous or something. I don't know. It was for people with respiratory disease at our local hospital here in Northampton. And I was joking with them and I said, just turn the oxygen up when you want to have fun. But I'm not a doctor. Remember, I'm a PhD in human sexuality education. Don't listen to me if I tell you to turn your oxygen up. But what I did learn from reading all of the research that Whipple and her colleagues and other folks have more recently published is that sex actually can be good for your health. Another really interesting, there it is. It was Shen and Liu just last year did that study. And I have all of these in my references at the end of the slide deck. And if you're interested in reading any of the articles, you can see the links there, or you can write to me. I'll be happy to send you a PDF. But I mentioned Maggie Symes' research before. She was at Kansas State before she came east to Boston. And one of the things that I loved about her research was she interviewed a lot of people. And what she found was for some people, in fact, the name of the article is "At My Age, ... as if to say, I could do the laundry, I could open the mail, sex is not that important. And then to other people, it was super important and a real part of their sexual identity, their older adult identity as a sexual being. And so what she really deduced from that, from all these interviews, is that sexual wellness in later life is really something much more broad and much more heterogeneous than I think people would want to sort of push us all into one little box. Now, most of these articles that I've just briefly, kind of, highlighted for you are about heterosexuals in heterosexual couples. And in the work that I did around older adults in same-sex relationships, or people in the LGBTQIA plus older adult populations, I looked at a few indicators to see what was important to them and what was unimportant to them around their sexual satisfaction. And what I found was that they were all correlating together, that resilience was actually very high in this group. Internalized homophobia, or this idea that what the rest of the world thinks about homosexuals, I've taken in on myself. Internalized homophobia was actually very low. Relationship satisfaction was very high. And each of those were correlated with one another. And that relationship satisfaction was a real predictor for sexual satisfaction, which in that group was not very high. And so I realized that there's a lot more work to be done around really beginning this conversation of what does sex mean for older adults as we're aging. And so this is just a few articles. There's many, many more. And I would encourage you, if you're a nerd like me and you like to read articles, let me know. I'd be happy to send you any of these. In fact, on a monthly basis, I have a journal club with a bunch of folks around the country where we read an article each month and a different person presents it, and they're all about sexuality and aging. And what's fun about it is that I'm beginning to see that the tide is really changing, as I said, that it isn't all about problems. So when I say, we got to start talking about sex, that's Geertz Medan, Ateret Geertz Medan. She's published a bunch of really interesting articles, and she's one of my favorite sex researchers. I have kind of a crush on her research. And there's me giving a talk at my parents' assisted living community a couple of years ago. And Tarot's research and this idea of talking about sex really highlighted for me a term that I had never heard that she uses in her work. And she talks about not just ageism and not just sexism, but she puts it together, sexual ageism, meaning we have such a sex negative, sex phobic, although kind of bifurcated with selling everything we can think of under the sun using sex. But we are very sort of fearful about talking frankly about sex. And we're very conditioned to think of older adults as being over the hill, doddering, can't get it up, can't sit up, can't stand up, all that. And so she kind of reminds the rest of us that sexuality and aging really together are fighting two intersecting and maybe more intersecting marginalizations. And so I began today by saying, I wanted to answer your questions and talk to you about sex, but I also wanted to teach you a couple of things that we may not have learned when we were back in high school, because these things didn't exist. So I'm going to ask Dale to hop on for a minute and put your screen back on if I can see you. It would be great. Let's see. There you are. Hi, Dale. And I asked Dale before we began if she'd be willing to do an activity with me using this sexual consent model that this guy, Al Vernacchio, who's a colleague of mine, developed in 2014. He wrote this very cool book called For Goodness Sake. He also has a TED Talk. If you don't feel like reading the book, you can watch the TED Talk, but they're both really good. But he uses this idea of pizza. So Dale, remember the baseball metaphor? Oh my God, you live with a baseball fan. So the baseball metaphor, which was like first base was making out, second base was feeling her up, third base, I never quite knew what third base was putting your hands down her pants. I never really, and then home base was, penis and vagina intercourse. Woohoo, the finale. So Al Vernacchio was really upset about this metaphor, the baseball metaphor. He teaches high school, by the way, in Philadelphia. So he came up with this idea of pizza, using pizza instead of baseball. Okay. So Dale, you're going to like this, I think. We'll see. So Dale, I asked you before, but I'm going to ask you again. Do you still want to have this time to have this activity with me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So folks in the audience, Dale and I are going to order a pizza, wink, wink, but we're using pizza to symbolize the idea of two people thinking about entering into a sexual activity with each other. So it'll just take us a couple of minutes. And folks, watch for all the hallmarks of consent and see how we do with this. And we haven't rehearsed, right, Dale? No. Okay. So I'll start. So Dale, I love pizza. After this is over, would you be into going downtown and maybe getting a slice of pizza or maybe ordering a pizza with me?
Sure. Depends on where we go.
Good point. Okay. So, well, let's talk about what kind of pizza you like. What kind of toppings are you into?
Well, I don't like meat.
Okay.
So.
Okay, good. We're clear on that. Me neither. No sausage, no pepperoni. Okay. Do you like onions, peppers, mushrooms, any of that stuff?
Yeah,
Basil?
I like onions. I like basil. I like tomatoes.
Okay.
I even like a little arugula sometimes on top.
Ooh, really that's pretty spicy of you. I like that. Okay. What about eggplant? Okay, forget eggplant. No. What about what kind of like crust do you like? Are you
I like
gluten-free?
I'm not gluten free.
Okay, good.
Regular. I'm not even into like whole wheat.
Okay, good.
Good pizza crust.
Okay, great. So thin, like New York
Thin,
style?
really thin.
Thin. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And what about like how big a pizza would you want to order? Because size matters.
Size matters. I can't eat a whole pizza.
Okay, same here. So maybe the only thing is that I was thinking I'd rather get like a pizza without any tomato sauce on it. So could we have like half tomato sauce, half not? Would that be all right with
You
you?
can do that though. I'm okay with a white pizza.
Okay, great. All right. So you're still into like going, maybe I wish Pizza Paradiso was still here, but maybe we could, I don't know, go to Roberto's or something.
Roberto's, yeah, let's go to Roberto's.
Awesome. All right, great. So we're gonna stop our activity right here. Everybody can snap if your cameras are on. Thank you, Dale. Great job. And put in the chat anything that you noticed. And I'm gonna ask Dale before I let you go, Dale, what it was like to be on the spot like this, to be ordering a pizza, but you knew that we were kind of doing an activity that was also about sex.
How did I feel? I felt like I was listened to. I felt comfortable with the way you asked me about what I
Right.
wanted. I noticed that I started with what I didn't want.
Yeah, that's great. Very
That's not
smart.
what you asked.
But very smart because it's a boundary, right? Because consent is about boundaries. Great. Yeah. And did you feel pushed into doing anything, or did you feel like?
No, I felt like if we had kept on like this, we'd starve before we got our pizza.
Great, right, great. Thank you. And folks who are listening, feel free to chime in and tell us what you noticed. Because remember, consent, we never were taught consent, right? So many of us, like I hear this from people all the time. I was having sex for 40 years with, my marriage, but it was all obligatory. I never did what I wanted to do. I always did what they wanted to do, that kind of thing. So consent now is being taught in schools, K-12, also in colleges, around consent has to be enthusiastic. Consent can be taken away. You can make a decision and change your mind. It's changeable, right? Consent is about boundaries. Consent is about what you want. And so all of that is something that I like to teach in order to remind people that, yes, you have control over your own body. You have self-determination. And as I was saying earlier in this model, in terms of sexual justice, you get to decide what gets sexually charged in your own body. So if we have any comments at all, Dale, let me know because it'll be fun to see.
Someone noticed that you asked questions, that there was compromise, and that we stated our needs.
Cool, very cool. And folks, you can't always get what you want, right? So compromise is a really good word, I think, around negotiating sexual activity at any age. And when I was talking about STIs before, making sure that people are using safer sex techniques, because there's a lot of people who either haven't been with somebody in a long time, or they've divorced, or their partner has passed away, or they're separated, and they're starting a new relationship with someone else. And you gotta make sure that you're protecting yourself sexually from any sexually transmitted infection. And so it's important to ask for what you want. So thanks, Dale. That was great. So I want to also teach you another thing that's been showing up a lot, and that's around gender and sexual orientation. And this is, this last one around sexual consent, you could think about it in terms of sexual justice, as I said, or even sexual health. This one is really about, an idea that I have is that there are many teachers around the country who can't even talk to a kid about gender, can't even talk to a kid about sexual orientation. The kid says, teach, I think I'm gay. If you are working in the state of Florida and other states right now, you can get fired for answering that question. And there are 1-800 numbers that parents are told to call if the kid comes home and reports that the teacher had been talking to them about sex, sexuality, gender, and orientation. This is a heavy topic right now for me. And so around this whole area of sexual justice, some people in our age group, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes get confused around what young people are talking about in terms of gender and pronouns, and also around gender identity and sexual orientation, even ACE and asexuality. we grew up around the Kinsey continuum from, homosexuality to heterosexuality. There was no asexuality, right? So there's so much more research that's been done since then. And I love this model. This was done by Landon Pan and Anna Moore of the Trans Student Educational Resources Group. And what they do here is they separate out gender identity, expression, the sex you were assigned at birth, who you're physically attracted to, and not just that, but who you're emotionally attracted to. Because many people get confused that they might have some incredibly close friends of the same gender, but they're not emotionally or sexually or intimately or physically attracted to them. And they wonder about that. And it could be the opposite as well. So I wanted to clue you into Lisa Diamond's work. Lisa Diamond is a real interesting researcher who did a book called Sexual Fluidity that came out of some research she did over a 10-year span. And she found that sexual orientation and gender identity are not fixed, but in fact, they could change over time. And this is something that's really kind of revolutionary for many people in our generation who thought that it was absolutely fixed at any time. There's one more activity that I wanted to just take you through, and you can do this on your own. And this is really just something to do inside your mind. But it's called the Hourglass, and it came out of the Joyful Sexuality Handbook a group of people up in the state of Vermont did for trauma survivors, actually, to reclaim their sexual lives after recovering from trauma. And of course, recovery sometimes takes, a lifetime. And our lifetime's work is often just to recover from what happened to us at a younger age. And so they use this symbol of the hourglass with sands running through it to think about the hourglass as a symbol and thinking about in the top portion, what felt good on your body as a child. Maybe you could put it in the chat. I always think about like jumping in the leaves in the fall or making snow angels in the winter when we used to have snow. The smell of chocolate chip cookies, just thinking of different senses. What felt good on your body as a child is a fun thing to think about. And then also to remember that at that narrowing, there may have been some trauma that occurred, some difficulties, or some adverse experiences that you had to go through, that we've all gone through our lives. Our bodies have been through a lot. And so what challenges did you experience back then? It could be a divorce. It could be a violation in terms of sexual violence. It could be physical violence. It could be so many types of challenges. And then at the bottom part of the hourglass, as you age, what kinds of pleasure do you imagine would be possible for you now? And so I love this because the folks who developed this activity really thought about it for survivors of sexual violence, but I'd suggest that I've adapted it to be useful for people who are survivors of life, that we've gone through bad bosses, we've gone through difficult marriages, we've gone through, terrible losses in our political work, so many different kinds of things. And then how do we, at this point in our lives, find pleasure? And it could be sexual pleasure, it could be any kind of pleasure. So I offer that to you as just another activity to think about and to ponder on after, we're done here today, to just imagine maybe, what you can create or recreate in your life that could afford you more pleasure. So remember that thought experiment we did earlier, way back about an hour ago? So think about these indicators. As a sexuality educator, I always think about three things: knowledge or confidence, skills, and attitudes or affect. And I would apply those to thinking about how you want to recreate or create a pleasure-focused life for yourself as a sexual being as you age? What kind of knowledge or confidence do you need to embody? What's your access to a partner or partners? You wouldn't believe how many people call me and text me and email me and say, how do I find someone? I'm just really lonesome. And COVID really exacerbated that for many people. And then what are your attitudes? Do you have that thing where the nuns told you that you're going to grow hair on the palm of your hand if you masturbated? What are those messages that you got when you were a kid that may really curtail your ability to feel positive about sexuality as we age? And how can you work through those, shed those, and hopefully challenge those attitudes? Because, hey, folks, I've got hopes. I've got hopes for all of us for our future because I'm an organizer. What Dale said is true. When I was in my 20s, we were organizing clerical workers. It was probably the best organizing campaign I was ever on. And I've done dozens of campaigns since then. But when you're organizing, you need to figure out what the stumbling blocks are. You got to figure out what the barriers are first, and then you can develop your strategy, right? But if we have a project, called our pleasure project or our pleasure campaign, what are the questions that you need to answer? What's the confidence you need to build? What's the access, and what are the attitudes you need to embody? And so, I'd suggest that you probably have them in your head, but maybe nobody's asked them about you before because, we all have different groups that we belong to, book groups, and I have a Jane group that I belong to of people named Jane. And, I have my Pilates group, and we have so many groups. I have running groups, but, why don't we have a group where we get to talk about sex? What's wrong with us? It's so much fun. It's delightful. And, it could really be helpful. So I'd suggest that maybe after this, I've just got a few more things to say. After I'm done, if you have any questions at all, anything at all you want to ask me, I'll let you know if I can answer it, and I'll be happy to hear your questions. But before I do that, I wanted to give you some moment to think about some challenges. What do you think about that body? That's a 100-year-old woman who was willing to be photographed for an incredible photography exhibit. She said she'd be willing to be photographed nude. The only thing she didn't want in it was her face, which is understandable. And I have the whole exhibit. It's beautiful. And yet we are trained, our eyes are trained not to think of those extra rolls and those extra wrinkles as beautiful. And what I've been doing lately with a lot of groups, and I really welcome your input on this, is I ask people to change the word aging to the word beautiful. So for instance, when I talk about my aging body, I would talk about my beautiful body. You get what I'm saying? To really just sort of flip the narrative a little bit. The other thing I've been doing lately is I've been doing a body scan every morning when I get up. And instead of saying, oh, my hip or oh, my neck or whatever it is, I send love to that part of my body. And believe me, it does not change the pain. Okay, the pain never goes away. It goes away after I exercise or I go to my acupuncture or massage. But that morning when I say I love that part of my body, when I say I love my hip, it doesn't make my hip feel better. What it does is it just changes the narrative a little bit about sending some love to embody that part of me that's really in a different state than I was in my 20s and my 30s. And I really don't want to go back to my 20s and 30s. Now, this is a group of people that I am a part of. These are my co-hosts on my podcast, which I really recommend you listen to because it's a lot of fun. It's all about sex and aging. And we're always looking for new subscribers. So please sign up. Sada, can you do me a favor and just put the podcast link in? The URL is ourbetterhalf.net, Our Better Half. We call it Our Better Half because it's about sex in the second half of life, and that's our better half. And that's Jaylene Galarza Patterson to my right, Rosera Teresi on the bottom right, and Sabita Pillai-Friedman on the bottom left. They're all sex therapists and sex educators. They're all PhDs like me and in human sexuality, and we just have a blast, as you can see. So I challenge you to really change that narrative about aging. And I want to give you some recommendations and resources. I got some tips. Talk about toys. Just start talking about toys. Toys are amazing. There's some people in this group today who've been to my workshops that I do, like at our local lingerie boutique store, Gazebo, here in Northampton. And we always give away free sex toys. And it's a lot of fun. People get real excited. And you're living in an age where you don't have to use your hand so much. If your hand gets tired, there's a vibrator. If your penis isn't working as well as it used to, and it doesn't get hard as fast or as long, or doesn't go in the same direction it used to, there's a toy for that. What I'm trying to say is you're living in a time where there's a lot more available toys, and you can go to a sex toy store, and they love when old people come because they get to talk to people who are really interested. So talk about toys. The second is, if you're feeling dry and you're feeling like if you have a vulva and your vaginal canal is not as lubricated personally as it used to be, there's lubes on the market. There's even lubes that are, get this, formulated for old people's bodies. There's a lube called Uber Lube. I love that name. And they have put vitamin E in their lubes. Anyway, get a lube, make sure that it's not got a lot of junk in it, but get a lube that's either water-based or water-based. I'd say water-based is the best, but also glycerin-based. If you're going to be having sex with somebody new, or if you're having sex after a long time not having sex, or if you're just having sex as an old person, know that there's going to be some things that go wrong. So for instance, you might have some sounds or smells or body emissions that you didn't know that you were going to have. Just embrace it. Find a way to love that and embrace the awkwardness, because it's your body and you never know what's going to happen. Be prepared. I was a Girl Scout when I was young, and I still believe in this motto, which is knowing that you want to be sexual. Think about your timing. Think about maybe having sex after your meds kick in if you have any kind of arthritis, or not after a big meal because you're going to want to fall asleep, or you get the idea. Don't have 2 glasses of wine, maybe have 1 glass of wine. My point is, make sure that your Bluetooth speaker and your Spotify is working, and you've got your tissues and your meds and your lube and your toys are all charged up, and you've got the right lighting. That's the other thing. People are real concerned about showing their wrinkles and their sags and their bags. Who cares? If you're worried about that, get into bed first and then call that person in afterwards, and they'll see you lying down and your sags and bags don't look nearly as harsh. And maybe light a candle, because the harshness of that bright light might be too much for you. Remember that loss is real. We have lived a long time, which means that we have also lost a lot in our lives, and the trauma is real. No matter what statistics you subscribe to, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 8 people in every room has experienced some kind of sexual trauma in their lifetime, and really know that that can be a part of your experience and maybe the person that you want to be sexual with. If you need somebody to talk to, there are great people out there. There are sexual medicine people, there are urologists, there are OBs, there are people who are available for dating help, for sex coaching. I just put something up on my Facebook page today about Sex Coach You. They are an amazing group. There are a million websites on the web about sex, and most of them are horrible. There's a few trusted ones that I'll show you in a moment. There's a lot of articles, there's books out there, there's PTs if you have pelvic floor issues or circulatory issues or respiratory issues or hormonal issues, or maybe you have some endocrinology issues. There are people out there who you can consult. And if you need help, please let me know. And go on my website. I have lots and lots of free stuff up there that I'm happy for people to read. And find your group to talk about pleasure, and maybe before that, make pleasure a part of every day. Think about it. Think about what you want to do that will give your life pleasure today. Remember all that your body has done for you already. And finally, I'd love for you to open up to possibilities, adventure, and joy. Here's some helpful web resources. If you need a sex therapist, ASECT is the accrediting body for people like me as a sex educator and also sex therapist. Age Right is a really cool blog that I write for. You can find their stuff online. PFLAG is Parents, Friends, and Families of People in the LGBTQ movement. Planned Parenthood, as you know, has lots of great information. Our Better Half is our website. SECUS is a very cool social justice organization fighting for sex education. Stop It Now is a group right here, actually, in Western Mass that works with folks who have thoughts and fears about sexually abusing children and adolescents. And that drawer is one of the latest online sex toy boutiques that my friend Rosario Teresi, who's one of my co-hosts, runs. And anytime you use Jane 20, you get a discount. So I love that she put my name in there. So let me know if you didn't remember that. I'll be happy to help you do that. Here's my references. If you want any of them, please let me know. And listen, folks, if what I'm suggesting is daunting, as a retiree, you want to make the most of the time you have left in this world, right? Along with loss, it is quite possible that new discoveries lie ahead. So why not be the person who lives life on your own terms and finds pleasure each and every day? I'm so grateful to you, Dale. Thank you for inviting me, and to all of the MTA folks who helped put this on today, and to all of you who are here. Thanks for being here, and I'm really thrilled to hear whatever questions you have. That's how you can reach me, and that's my website. And if you send me an email, I will respond. I love hearing from people, because the worst thing about Zoom is I never know if anybody was listening or if they just, had their video off and they were out in the back, doing something else. So feel free to write to me. And there's a place on my website where you can contact me. And you can also get like a free consultation if you're interested in talking to me personally.